I'm JJ Perez from Inside Runner Sports. That is the Greg Luca from the San Antonio Express News coming to you from Game week number one of the 2025 season. Greg, the Roadrunners open up on the road against SEC opponent, the fighting Texas A&M Aggies. How you feeling? How you feeling headed into this game?
I'm feeling great about after that intro. I'm the Greg Luca this year, and we got the Fighting Aggies, and you're in midseason form already, so we're good to go.
I'm
I
ready
think,
to I'm ready to crank this up.
yeah, I feel like UTSA, I think we kind of, the storylines are pretty well documented at this point. I think we know we're going to look at some continuity on offense and some new guys on defense, and then we're going to see if some of the discipline and things that were problematic last year gets shored up. And I think in two sentences, that's kind of what I'm watching for this season. Do you have any big overview stuff?
No, not really. I mean, just excited to get the season going. I mean, is it going to be the year that Owen takes the big step in situational play, and who knows what the defense does? Are they able to improve statistically, and can the offense continue what they did at the end of last year? So, I don't know that we'll see any of that. We'll be able to tell any of that after Saturday's game, right? Because of who they're playing and the physical difference. I guess I let's talk a little bit about this matchup with Texas A&M. Are they are they a good matchup for the Roadrunners? Does that sound weird? Is that a weird question?
Yeah, well, I think the interesting thing to your point is, I guess unless you're an unrealistic fan with lofty expectations, you kind of this is like free, right? Like if things go well, that's awesome, and if they don't, well, then it wasn't supposed to go great anyway. So it's not a bad way to start the season. Sometimes I imagine from like an evaluation standpoint, if I was a coach, I'd probably want to see him against some kind of even strength opponent. Because if you see somebody who doesn't do well on film, maybe that's just because they were overmatched in this game. You might not learn a lot about how you should change the lineups or who's ready for the big time and who's not in this moment, just because they could be up against somebody who anybody in their position, anybody who's a candidate for that particular spot that you're putting under the microscope would have had the same problem. So, in terms of whether it's a good matchup, I think I'm going to go with no because I don't, A&M's defense, maybe there's some questions there. They're looking for some new guys. But when you look at A&M on the offensive side, I think the offensive line is just going to be problematic. The advantages they'll have in the trenches being considered as one of the best offensive lines in the country, I think means that even if this was an elite UTSA defense, instead of what we're looking at with so many question marks, I think A&M will just be able to move the ball, would be my guess, just based on sort of do you seem to think it's a good matchup? You sort of teed it up that way.
Well, I don't. I guess they could have gone up against like a air raid team, right? This is not a passing offense. I'm not expecting, right? So UTSA has some questions in the secondary, right, headed into this season. So
Yeah, I
maybe
guess maybe we feel a little bit more confident about, but we haven't really seen Chad Banks or Kendrick Blackshire do it. I mean, they've gotten a lot of preseason hype, but they're no more proven necessarily than a Davin Martin or a KK Meyer. They've both like been guys who have done it at a different school, and one guy who's kind of come up the ranks here last year and played a little bit. And so, um, yeah, I don't know. It's just hard to be too confident in any aspect of the defense, and that's kind of what I wrote about today. And when we asked Jeff Traylor a couple of times now, we've been talking since the end of last season. How is it coming together with 11 new starters? And he's just like, I don't know yet. And that's kind of how I feel too. If the coach can't give us an answer, I don't feel like I can give you guys an answer. But certainly, I think the talent is, it's nice that there's some people who have been around. They should
yeah.
know what they're doing, for the most part, but they haven't necessarily had the kind of snaps, and we just don't know if they're going to be able to be productive starters at this level. It's sort of you talk yourself into guys the longer we go around in circles in the preseason, but we just have to see it on the field first. We
Yeah,
don't
and
know if Shad Banks is.
right. It just from a depth standpoint at least, it seems like and I thought I brought it up today that the center of the defense, the defensive line, the three down linemen, the inside linebackers, and the safeties appear to be the strength of this defense going in. So at least that's what you would hope, just looking at the depth chart.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on the defensive line. I think you can look at what's up there and feel like there's a bunch of different guys because, I have high expectations for Kyan Roberts Day and for Johnny
Yeah.
Bowens. Both with Bowens, I guess it's a little bit of a health question, and they're not even listed as starters because you have Leonard and you have Buxton and you have John Jones listed as the three starters right now, and then. Even Cam Blaylock has seemed like a guy who could come in and be a contributor at nose tackle right away. So defensive line, I'm with you. The inside linebacker spot, like I said, we sort of tucked ourselves into Shad Banks and Kendrick Blackshire, and we like Brandon Tucker just based on what we've been told, but we still have to see it. And I don't know if there's a fourth guy that we feel great
Right.
about. I mean, there's names, but I don't know that we have anybody. And then safety is kind of similar. It's Jimmy Wyrick and Jamarius Lewis who we feel good about, and Elijah Newell showed a lot. So you feel good about three guys there. But, is Tyne Milton coming over from corner, A, healthy and B, productive at that position? I think that remains to be seen. But certainly compared to corner and to the pass rushing spot, I think I'm with you on that part of it, where I would feel more confident about up the middle compared to the edge guys.
Let's put a bow on this Texas A&M game. I want to talk a little bit more about the depth chart, the offensive side of it that we saw released this week. But a payday game for the Roadrunners, $1.5 million payday game, and I think we heard this week they're doing some stuff with the speaker or something with Owen McCown getting ready for the noise. A kind of big time atmosphere. It's a little. Jeff Traylor said it's different. The press box moves over there when they
Yeah.
start swaying back and forth. So it's a different atmosphere. Even I'd say even a little bit more different than some of the other places they've played at, but certainly Texas and Tennessee have given them experience the last two seasons.
Well, I think what you can feel good about is you would rather have the experience on offense and the inexperience on defense going into an environment like that compared to the other way, because the defense doesn't really need to communicate and link up in the same way as the offense does. So, I mean, if it's loud when UTSA is on defense, something's going wrong. That's usually probably a good sign for the Roadrunners. And then when it's going to be loud when UTSA is on offense, those guys are all used to working together and communicating and they face that kind of an environment once a year, but at least they're comfortable with each other. And you would think that they can figure out a way to sort of stay on the same page. So that's a little bit of an edge there. But yeah, I think before, if you want to pack up on A&M, I think we just have to talk a little bit about what A&M is going to do offensively.
Yeah.
Marcel Reed at quarterback is going to be kind of a mobile threat. He's got compared to Frank Harris and Lamar Jackson in the last couple of days. So that's pretty good company, depending on what level you're looking at there. And then they have two receivers they brought in. I think it's Craver is one of them, and then Casey Concepcion was the North Carolina State guy, and they seem to feel like those guys have the speed to sort of open up some things on offense, and they have a bunch of running backs they feel good about, and so I think this is known as a run first team, which is to your point, maybe that's a little bit advantageous, but we sort of seems to me like they probably can succeed in that way too.
Right.
So yeah, we'll
Right.
see how much of an advantage there really is.
Let me put you on the spot here early in this show. 24.5 point underdogs. Do you think the Roadrunners cover that?
I think we maybe get to like let's call it like a 52 to 24. So does that cover? No, that's not enough. So then I'll take A&M. I reverse
Wow.
engineered that one.
Wow, 52. You're gonna 24 for the Roadrunners is pretty bad. Hey, listen, I like UTSA to cover this one. I don't these first games are a little bit tricky, right? So we'll see. I don't quite know what to expect in this game. So we'll see. We'll see. Let me jump back to the depth chart, Greg. We saw the first version of that get released earlier this week. I don't know from we've been tracking pretty closely who we thought was going to be in some of these spots. And I don't know that there were a ton of surprises from that. There are a lot of oars, a lot of guys listed three deep in some spots. I guess we learned this week there's an injury situation with the offensive line. So I guess let's start there. Two new starters on the offensive line at both guard positions.
Yeah, Corey Godinet is still an or, so I guess he could be healthy enough to start. That one seems a little bit more iffy. And then, yeah, Venley listed number two there, so I guess he's still working his way back. Which it seemed like for plenty of stretches of practice that he was good to go. So I was a little bit surprised at that. I sort of thought when that popped up that it was more of a maintenance thing, but for one reason or another, this is kind of how they're leaning, and at least it feels like they're confident in the two transfers that they've brought in with Timmons from Georgia State, and Daryl Jones is interesting coming in as a D2 guy. It's hard to even know a whole lot about what sort of role he played last year, or what he's most comfortable with. But 340 pounder obviously has the
Yeah.
size to hang at this level. And if he can move a little bit, that's just a bonus. But compared to past years where we saw if they had an injury, they had to move some guys around and shuffle a little bit, it does feel like they have two options that they feel good about. Maybe not as much at tackle, although Kamar Missouri is the starter at left tackle, and Demetrius Allen has been around forever, and it still feels like that's a guy that could play tackle for them in a pinch. And then on the other side, we've seen DeAndre Marshall play a little bit. So if anything happened to Jalen Garth, and if anything, they're probably most confident at center, where you have Ben Rios, who seems ready to step into that role. But Luke Lopez was a contender to start last year, and was probably a contender to start this year as well. That's listed as an or two. We've kind of just I shouldn't say we. I have sort of penciled in Ben Rios as the starter because that's always seemed the way it's going. But based on the depth chart, it's possible it could be Lopez for the first snap too. So I think there's certainly some interesting moves that they can make on the offensive line if they have to. But they also have the depth to just go next man up if somebody gets injured. So it's not encouraging to see early injuries, but the way they've able to respond to it is.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, and I tried to get this out of Jeff a little bit today, that this might be his deepest offensive line unit he's had. I mean, Owen McCown said something today that he doesn't notice a drop off between the first and second team offensive line. And I mean, in previous years, if you're starting the year off with two guys, starters maybe not playing, the sky is falling. So for them to at least have what looks to be serviceable bodies there is I think a considerable step forward.
And they're a team that not a lot of teams rotate offensive linemen, but when they're healthy, they seem to like to do that. And so I think we could see even more of that this year, especially if the second group or, would be first group gets back up and you really are too deep across the board.
Any other surprises on the depth chart? I know you noted a walk on the defensive line there, and I don't know that we got any clarity with special teams with the oars on there, but
Yeah.
hey, Texas A&M listed three deep snappers, so we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Kenny Ozawalu, a local guy from the San Antonio area, stepping in as a redshirt freshman and being listed above Damian Wimberly, and even compared to the other side of the defensive line, I don't know how he stacks up against Kyan Roberts Day and Johnny Bowens, but Johnny Bowens is on the third line and Kenny Ozawalu is on the second line, so it's just interesting. That's probably could be injury related for Bowens. I know he's working his way back too, but it's still just noteworthy that a guy who came in as the walk-on and as only a redshirt freshman too. It's not like he's super deep into his career. Has sort of asserted himself as a potential starter and a rotational guy, um, with some of these power conference transfers that we're talking about there. And it sounds like he came in pretty small and has bulked up and it just held it well and has continued to produce. So that's a really interesting one. And then the other thing that I looked at right away when we got the depth chart was corner because we just weren't sure who those guys were going to
Yeah,
be all year. And
yeah.
Davin Martin was the one we were comfortable penciling in, and then looks like KK Meyer from Nevada, the transfer, is the guy on the other side. So, he's played a little bit. I think he was rotational last year and had started 2 years ago. So he's been out there and he's got some experience. And we'll just see what kind of how that translates and what level he plays at getting that opportunity. But he's the first guy up. So it's not Jacavian Rogers, which we talked
Yeah.
about a lot. The Whether his kind of physical development now in his third year had him ready to step up into a starting role, and maybe that's just still a work in progress, which we kind of always thought it would be.
Are you surprised at the running back position to see Will Henderson as the backup?
It's interesting because it depends on the health of the other guys. I think Bryson Donnell hasn't done a lot in the fall. It seems like I don't know exactly what his status is, and John Emery, Coach Traylor has told us he's kind of working his way back from the back-to-back ACL tears and try to get up to full speed. I don't think that he's done a ton either. So then it becomes is Frankie Arthur ready to go, and then Marion Peterson is the guy who's listed as the
Yeah,
or with Will Henderson. But at least we've seen Will Henderson do it here, and having Will Henderson as your number two back, at least like aesthetically, is really interesting because he's a different type of player from Robert Henry, where you're happy to have that sort of, Robert Henry's not a 240 pounder or whatever, but he
yeah,
still
yeah.
plays like a back at 205 and is a tough guy to bring down. And then Will Henderson brings you the speed option. And who knows if he plays 15 to 20 snaps as a running back, or if he plays 5 to 10 snaps, as a slot who's moving in motion, or if they're kind of doing funny stuff to try to get him the ball and get him in space. But I do think you'll see him out there as a potential weapon for this offense. So I think it makes sense. Is that kind of how you expected it would shake out?
Yeah, for sure. And I do expect John Emery at some point to break through into rotation and maybe even push Robert Henry for starting snaps. So we'll see how that goes as the season goes on. Greg, I want to take a step back and take an overall look at the expectations for the Roadrunners this season.
Mhm.
There's a the Vegas odds makers have the over under for regular season wins at 7.5. Uh I like the over. I'd probably even go one more, 8.5. Where do you see this Roadrunner team in 2025 with their win total expectations?
The only problem that I have is I'm doing the same thing I did last year where I look at the schedule and I'm like, I can't find three losses. And then they lost 6 games. So,
Yeah.
like, you just don't really know until you see it. If they're going to not play at their top form, they can lose to a team like Rice or a team like Tulsa that you wouldn't expect. And So when you look at the schedule this year, I do sort of have the same feelings. Like I think that at home that they're better than Texas State, and I think as much as you don't want to go on the road to an 8-4 G5 team, I think they're better than Colorado State. And so, I think they come out of non-conference 3-1, and then you start looking at the conference games, and it's like Temple, Rice, North Texas. Tulane's a tough one. At South Florida is a tough one, and then home against Army is a tough one. So you're looking at the loss to Texas A&M in all likelihood, and then you would look at three losable games, and then do you slip up somewhere else? So it's pretty easy to say 8-4 would be a good pick, but it feels like 9-3 is in play. But go to North Texas and maybe something happens there, and now you have a loss that you're not counting on, and then it goes out of whack pretty quickly. So, I think if you were to set it at 8.5, I don't think a lot of people would take the over. I mean, 9-3 is reasonable, but I think at that point, eight is probably what I feel most comfortable with. 8-4 seems like a good mark, which is again, we have to get in the habit of doing this every year, but it's like 8-4 is a good season if they put it together. I hope everybody understands that because they raised the expectations there for a while.
I can see a world where UTSA goes 2-2 in non-conference play, right? They've historically started off slow. They're
Oh, sure,
good.
yeah.
Yeah, they're good at home. They're great at home and kind of marginal on the road, right? So I do think the schedule with the conference portion of the schedule kind of breaks pretty good for the team, right? They have the bye week. They don't get what some consider some of the top schools, and the two Thursday night games are not short weeks, right? They're spread apart. So it's not a terrible schedule. I circle four games on the conference schedule for me that I don't know how they're going to shake out, right? I think North Texas is going to be sneaky good. They have who knows what their offense looks like. And then you mentioned it, Tulane, South Florida Army. I mean, those are almost toss-up games, and I would consider UTSA and those last three schools that I mentioned among the top in the American. So if I'm looking worst case scenario, I'm splitting non-conference. I'm splitting those two games, and I see UTSA running the table on the rest of the schedule. So that's 8-4. You're right, 9-3 if they're able to do something. I don't know if more than one conference loss gets you to the conference championship. And that's kind of the question I have is even if you do have an 8-win season and that's really good, if you're not competing for the championship, do you still consider that a success? And, you know, how do you continue to build on that?
Yeah, it just sort of depends. If you're in a scenario at the end of the year where Memphis and Tulane are top 25 teams, or at least in that conversation, and they're contending for that college football playoff spot with, maybe Boise State slips up or whoever else is going to be in the mix for that. And then UTSA is in that second tier, and they are maybe like a top 40 team or something like that at 8-4. Then I think that's still a season you should feel pretty good about. But it's interesting how the league shakes out because it does seem like those two teams, the Tulane and Memphis, are sort of viewed as a step ahead, even though if you really try to like study them and learn what's going on there, it's just all new players. You're just sort of assuming that the talent is going to win out and the systems that they have and the coaches
Same
that they
thing
have are going to.
with Army, right?
Yeah, right, right. That's the same thing. Yeah. And, I think Army, Navy, and UTSA are kind of that next group. And then there's the South Florida wild card. Unless I'm missing somebody, I feel like that's kind of how I've been
Yeah.
sizing up the conference. So from that perspective, I think UTSA still has an uphill battle to get into a championship game consideration. To your point, I think the schedule breaks moderately. You play Tulane, but you miss Memphis, and you play Army, but you miss Navy. And so I think yeah, they'll have a shot at it. I think it'll come down to certainly that game against Tulane at home will be critical. It's funny. It's kind of like last year they have a Halloween-ish
Yeah.
game against probably the toughest team on the schedule at home. So we'll see how they do that if the lights out has a little bit more hype. Although I mean they delivered on it last year. They might have been 2-4 at the time, but they beat Memphis. So it still turned out to be a pretty big game for them and sort of started them on the run that we saw towards the end of the year. And then I can already envision all the storylines around Army with that being the end
Yeah.
of the year game and the only team that's ever given them trouble in the Alamo Dome for the most part. It's going to be really interesting to see. I guess they have to make it through another year 5-0 at that point at home to have that be a real talking point. But that has been a team that they've kind of struggled with at times. And so if there's a high stakes on that one, it'll be really, really fascinating.
Official, let's get it on the record here, Greg. Official 2025 regular season win total. 8-4.
Yep, 8-4 for me too. I think I can't do anything other than that, I don't think.
nine with the possibility of a 9-win season, and it's interesting. I think we have them in kind of different parts of the schedule. So, uh,
Yeah, I would say nine's more likely than seven. But yeah, you mentioned this. I mean, like they lost to Texas State by like a million points last year. Like I shouldn't be dismissive of that game. I think UTSA will be favored, especially playing at home and probably having the better team. But obviously that's like not a gimme. So, and same for Colorado State. UTSA is favored, but it's not like 100% they're going to go win. So, yeah, there's potential slip ups there in the non-conference. Coach Trailers talked about how hard it is. So, I will not be surprised if they end up 2-2 in non-conference and then they have to come up with 2-2 in those conference games you talked about to make it to the 8-4. But it's still going to be reasonable either way.
I think between our videos here, this is our second one of the preseason, all the stuff. I think we've pretty much covered as much of the preseason hype and expectations as possible. Um, you think we missed anything? I feel like it's all buttoned up here.
Yeah, well, the offense we sort of know. I mean, I think there's probably maybe more room to talk about some of the defense and what you could expect from some different guys or not expect. But again, it's just guesswork. So,
Yeah.
we could spend some time on it, but I don't know that we'd be saying anything that would be all that instructive. I think it's going to be, it's worth restating that I think the outside linebacker, the Cam Cooper, Vic
Yes.
Shaw position is going to be kind of a make or break that we haven't highlighted yet. Just if one of those guys or both of those guys can produce at a high level, they're going to need that pass rushing threat because we've seen how important Jamoy Robinson and Trey Moore and Clarence Hicks and Charles Wiley and you go back through the years, the guys who played that spot have been as important as anyone on this defense, and they need. In this defense, you need a really strong player at that role if you want to thrive. So one of those guys will have to step up.
Yep. I I I think it's going to be the combination of the guys in the group. Maybe one of them is going to prove me wrong there, but that's kind of what I think. We'll see. I don't know that we thought Jamoy Robinson was going to be an all conference player this time last year.
Absolutely
So
not. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Correct.
we'll see how that goes. I think one thing I did wanted to talk about, Greg, shifting uh from football specifically, but kind of talking about football is this kind of new brand UTSA is putting out, the school, right? UT San Antonio with the merger of UT Health
Yeah.
and UTSA. A little branding event this week at the athletics facility. First, I guess, can you explain to me the new brand?
Uh, Well, no, I was going to say I think the least confusing thing is to just not talk about it because the athletics isn't changing at all. So like the
Right.
easiest way to address it is to just not address it because otherwise if you start getting people to think that stuff's going to change, then they're going to start looking for things that are different. If you just do everything you've been doing, you'll get it right. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it. But yeah, I mean
That's what we
it's just from the
say, but there's a lot of San Antonio branding out there, right? That
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
makes it a little bit more confusing and a little bit. Look, I get what they're trying to do, right? It's a new merger between two schools. They're trying to to kind of capture the moment, but from an athletic standpoint, a football standpoint, nothing really is going to change.
Yeah, and I think if they want to put more San Antonio on stuff, they could have done that with or without a merger. But and I mean, all the merch and stuff like the San Antonio hat and the San Antonio football polo have been a big hit. I mean, not that they're for sale yet. I guess at some point, hopefully, that'll be a thing that people can get their hands on because they seem to like it. But generally, I think that's more like just a stylistic choice, and I guess it makes sense. I don't know that there's too much confusion still about what UTSA is or where it is, but it's hard for us to weigh in on that because we live it every day. So, if the San Antonio helps people outside here, if the marketing experts have determined that, that's the thing. You pay all these consultants to come up with your new logo and stuff, so then you have to use it, right? Because otherwise,
Right.
what are those people?
Yeah.
So,
What's the whole point? Well, Greg, unless I missed anything, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. You ready for some football this weekend?
I was gonna say we have a whole season ahead, so you don't have to feel like we got to hit everything today. We'll be back.
Yep, we'll be back. We'll
What
be
are we doing?
back.
Are we doing recaps? Are we doing previews? What are we doing this year?
Let's stick with the recaps. This is just kind of a one-off special uh prediction. I wanted to get our predictions on the record.
Oh,
I
it's a good
wrote,
move.
yeah, I wrote something similar this week. So yeah, we'll both be in College Station this weekend, and then we'll wrap that game up, and then it's every week. So we'll see. So I think that'll wrap it up, Greg. Greg Luca, San Antonio Express News. Check it. Check out his website for all his great content. Another good story today. You've been cranking them out, and I think there's a
Oh,
special
thanks,
to
man.
there's special to join your website. So you guys be sure to take, I think that runs through football season, so take advantage of that. JJ Perez, Inside Runner Sports. Check out all my stuff there. Appreciate you guys watching. Thanks.